welcome to our webinar. I'm joined today by Ann Highton, who's a governance, assurance and risk management specialist, and also Molly Kent, who's a quality improvement and patient safety specialist. And I guess it's important to start out. The webinar is going to be about 20 minutes long, and then we'll have 10 minutes towards the end to answer any of your questions. Also, you'll be able to post your questions while we're going through the webinar, and we'll take a look at those and respond to you at a later date. So today, we're going to be taking a look at how we manage risk in the second wave of COVID-19. And I guess, Anne, the first question that I'd pose to you, what would you say is the importance of an integrated approach when we go through this second phase?
Yeah, thank you, Terry. It's my opinion that integrated risk management technology will have a significant impact on both individual organisations, for example, trusts, and also it'll have a huge impact if it's adopted across a system. So, for example, across an ICS, an STP, or within a place setting. In my experience currently, data collection and data analysis is limited, and that's limited either by a module within software. So, for example, a complaints module not speaking to an incident module, or by technology provider. So, for example, in some organisations there are two technology providers and they don't speak to each other. Or in case of an ICS or an STP, a system approach, they're limited by provider to provider. And where the user has to go into one element or one module and find a piece of data, and then go into another one to find a piece of data, it incurs a huge time penalty, and time is things that people don't have at the moment. So an integrated approach won't have these challenges because data will be entered using a standardized data set. It'll facilitate in-depth analysis across individual organisations, and also it'll enable us to analyse data across a whole system, which is currently what we don't do. There'll also be a consistency in approach, so we're all entering the same data the same way, we're all defining it the same way, and we're all analysing it in the same way. And therefore, the reports that are going through to boards, for example, will provide an accurate reflection on the risk profile within the portfolio that they're working with.
I think that's a really salient point, actually, Anne. It's almost removing yourself from the confines of that location and actually looking at a place-wide approach. So it's that micro and macro view. It's certainly something that we've been doing at Radar, supporting various organisations pre, during, and I'm sure post-pandemic. One which stands out is Methodist Homes. So a group who have about 90 different locations. They support nearly 19,000 older people up and down the UK. So they needed one system where it was completely integrated, like you say. There was a clear and logical flow between steps, but equally you had that double-edged assurance. Not only could the board see that the whole organisation was compliant at all times, but each member of staff knew exactly what they were doing, why they were doing it. It interconnected with other parts of the system, and it gave you that assurance that you really need when you're managing something so exceptional like this pandemic that we're living through.
Yeah, Molly, I guess a question for you as well. Could you perhaps give us an example of one of the key challenges due to COVID pandemic?
I think a key challenge has been this overnight from working in a way where we're in offices, we're having conversations across an office at a coffee machine. It's easy to have that face-to-face interaction, and suddenly overnight we have to depend on technology. So without robust systems in place and really strong channels of communication, I think a lot of organisations, particularly a few trusts that I've been speaking to, they've been struggling with that discord between what's going on at the shop floor and then people working at home, and that lack of communication. So really what we need is to rely on strong and solid technology to underpin our processes, lean on those technology companies to actually give us the support that we need, and then also foster those really strong communication channels so that, again, we can see, for example, an incident's happened, I've got visibility of the risk to everyone in that organisation, then right the way through to board, where you can see I'm compliant as an organisation, I know what we need to do, and I know where our resource is best placed as well.
And do we find that this kind of tech is working remotely?
Absolutely. I think one of the, speaking about Radar again, one of the benefits that people have really seen from Radar is because we're a cloud-based system, and obviously we're device agnostic as well, it means that actually you don't need to be at a specific location to access your day-to-day. You know, you can use it on the fly, I can use it on my phone, a laptop, tablet, whatever's appropriate for myself. So again, it means I've got access to the right data at the right time, and kind of coming back to Ann's point, the people using this tech are the most time-starved in the NHS anyway. Throw a pandemic on top of that, and people really don't have the time to be administrators of systems, and we need to learn good tech to support us and to really carry us through this difficult time. Right,
and Anne, I guess. Does this kind of help with agile decision making?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Because the majority of organisations now are looking at agile working, and therefore you have to be able to access the technology, you have to be able to access the data straight away, because during this pandemic, decisions have been made, change, action has happened really quickly. Therefore, you have to be able to access the relevant data immediately, so that you can take the relevant action immediately, which ultimately improves the patient safety. So yes, definitely.
Actually, an example of another organisation where we've done just that, Anne, is Malling Health. So they're a group of GP surgeries and of hours work, urgent care work as well. And we've supported them throughout that pandemic to actually have access to the right data at the right time, to be able to make decisions and communicate them really effectively. They were finding there was a big manual overhead with sending out information to their staff via email. Maybe it was a change to a policy, just an update, just those key comms. And then there was a flurry of emails, people replying to all, chasing emails, you know, phoning people up. And actually that whole manual overhead was removed by using Radar, because people were able to send out these really important notifications and comms, and the system tracks, monitors, and tells you who's received it, who's confirmed to have read it, who hasn't, but then the system is chasing that person. So it really removes that manual overhead, but also, again, gives the assurance to the member of staff that they've got the right information at the right time, but again, to the decision makers in the organisation and to board level, they can see that people are compliant.
That's another key element. The system will chase people and tell them and inform them where actions are taken or not being taken. Again, it's back to this time limit that we currently have and the fast pace of work. As much as technology can underpin our role, the better it will be moving forwards.
Yeah, and I guess then, and I suppose I could point this to both of you, it sounds like, particularly with Malling Health, we're talking about a shift in culture. I wonder if you'd want to say a bit about that.
Absolutely. I think actually, I mean, Anne, you'll have this experience hopefully as well, but a lot of organisations have wanted to have a new culture or a joined up culture, kind of have that golden thread of one process, no matter how large, small, or where your location's based. But actually the pandemic has really shifted that into gear, because it was absolutely necessary when it started, when people were planning, to have that one culture and to have a really strong, a strong, robust approach to incidents, risk, to reviewing risk, make sure you've got the right information at the right time, and also to actually be able to evidence all of that in real time as well. I mean, we look at the phase 3 letter, which was published in August, and that completely alludes to we must learn from our first wave and implement those learnings. And really, without that strong culture and a way of evidencing all of those learnings, how are you going to embed and ensure that is part of the continually improving culture kind of moving forward? And I don't know if that's the same experience that you've had.
It is, absolutely. And I think, and one example I have is the use of MS Teams. There was a reluctance in the team that I work with to use MS Teams pre-COVID, and I think it was about 3 months of discussion, and then within 3 days of COVID arising, everybody was on MS Teams. And it's just an example of how the COVID pandemic has given us opportunities to improve systems and processes for the future, or as certainly as we're coming out of our reset phase.
Well, that's really helpful, thank you. And I guess it helps me segue to my next question, was how do we make sure we're sharing best practice?
So if I start off with that one, I think the first thing for me is the imperative best practice, both within organisations and across ICSs. There are a couple of, or there are probably 2 ways we can do this. One is by formal guidance that's issued by such as NHSEI, CQC, and formal publications. Equally, and what I found more important is the informal networks that have arisen since the start of the COVID pandemic, especially relating to risk management. There wasn't any information relating to risk descriptors, how to grade a risk, how to analyse a risk. And what I've seen over the past few weeks is that individuals are now contacting people to ask for their thoughts on a given topic, which is really positive. And that then develops itself into some sort of a standardised risk management methodology across a process. And equally, everybody's coming to this pandemic from a different perspective, so they're looking at a situation from their trust point of view. If we can develop these informal networks, and preferably formal networks, then we can start to standardise risk response over a wider footprint. And I think there are 2 things. We have a duty to share our findings so that we make the burden easier on our colleagues. And I think if we haven't got risk networks, we should be starting to form them informally, reach it out to our colleagues.
Sorry, just one thing that bounces off what you were saying there, Anne. So I guess that we've done COVID-1, we're now into 2, and is this really the time to embed the new learning from
Yes.
what we've experienced in 1 and also previous to COVID?
Yes, and again, if we don't do that, I think that's poor behaviour, because I think we should be looking at the processes before the pandemic and looking at the processes now. And a lot of organisations have already done this. Processes that are no longer effective, discontinued. For example, face-to-face meetings. Processes that were started post-COVID pandemic and are considered to be effective should be now continued. So for example, that's the virtual meetings and the virtual consultations. And then during the pandemic, there were processes that were stopped and pended during the pandemic, and we're now being asked to reconsider. So restart. So we should be looking now at any systems and processes that we've pended and we want to restart. And then also we should be embracing any innovations that have come out of the first phase, so that we've done a complete review, and what we're coming out with now is a reset, so that we're now addressing our risk for the next wave, or the current wave, and we're addressing it in a more proactive way, because we've learnt from the findings from the previous phase.
That's really interesting, and I guess from a tech angle as well, then you need 2 things. Number 1 is triangulation, so that actually the systems that you use are able to effectively triangulate, look at root cause analysis, so you can truly learn from anything which has happened during the first phase. And then secondly, you need tech in place which can bend and kind of ebb and flow with these new changes which are coming out. They're not static systems. You're not going to be, for example, charged and put on a long waiting list for changes. We need solid tech in place in our NHS which can change with demands. It can be rolled out at pace and remotely as well, given the current climate that we're living in. And I certainly know that that's a really key driver behind people choosing Radar. A lot of people have actually approached us during the pandemic and are seeing the benefits of a system like Radar because it's so configurable, because you've got that toolkit at your fingertips where you can A, triangulate, and then B, learn and change processes. So you're constantly improving and you're really embedding that culture of continuous improvement.
Yeah, if I can just support that, Molly, because being a user of technology systems, risk management systems, it's so frustrating when you know you have to change something and you can't change it, and the world's going on and leaving you behind because you're trying to get your changed. Not possible. And given the timeframes that we're working to at the moment, it has to be responsive.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's so important in the NHS and has been for so many years, but I think there is a laser focus on it now because we entrust our health with these systems. And if we're thinking about another industry, think about banking, would we entrust our money with systems that were either antiquated or didn't change to meet current demands? We just wouldn't. So why would we entrust our health in these places?
Excellent point.
Yeah, so I noticed that we're coming to the end of our time together, and I really want to get the views of the people that are on the webinar as well. But somebody out there might just be thinking, well, what one thing should I take away from this webinar today? And perhaps one thing from both of you might be helpful before we open the floor to questions.
Sure. Anne, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. My key lesson from this is that integrated technology will help, will assist, will support, and will make the people who are working within the portfolio or the specialty of risk management make their world easier, and therefore it will improve the patient safety.
Right. Yeah. And Molly?
I would say about being open to innovation, to be honest. I think it's been a really interesting time from a tech perspective, looking at innovation. And like Anne says, the example of using MS Teams overnight when we've been trying to embed it or organisations have been trying to embed it for months. So I think whilst operationally there is huge demand and there is a huge burden on everyone in the NHS at the moment, don't lose sight of that strategic piece as well. Keep an eye open for innovation, learn and share information, because an integrated approach and using truly innovative technology is really what's going to help us throughout this pandemic in the immediate, but also in the long term. The restoration of services, getting back to a business as usual as much as we can in the next sort of 5 years. That would be my takeaway.
There we have it, a new approach to tech and the importance of an integrated risk management approach. Can I just say thank you to both of you for joining me today.